Hello friends, this is Jim with Science Talk. I have a report to share with you involving the permafrost, and the findings are, to say the least, disturbing. We all know that the permafrost is thawing as the global warming is basically setting up shop. But we're seeing that the effects are at work far below in the surface, where you would think, well, they're deep enough, they should be insulated. Not necessarily. This is what's troubling. 10 meters below the surface of the polar land masses, we're seeing the effects of the warming planet. A new study of the frozen soils in both hemispheres showed that between 2007 and 2016, they warmed by an average of 0.3 degrees Celsius. This is true within the Arctic and Antarctic zones, in the highest mountain regions of Europe and Asia, even the Siberian tundra, where the temperatures at depth rose by almost 1 whole degree. 2 words for that. Holy shit. That's significant. New research into the permafrost, which of course is, soil has been frozen for at least 2 consecutive years, suggests that much of it may not be permanently frozen for much longer. Now, there's a little thing that needs to be clarified here. It is correct to say the permafrost is thawing. It is incorrect to say it is melting. Melting involves a change in physical state. If I take a slab of of ice from my freezer and I set it out on the table, it melts. It goes from the solid state to the liquid state. And what defines the liquid state? Basically, it's a measure of the internal viscosity reaching a threshold level. I'm not going to get into the details on it, but that's the idea of that. If I take a piece of, say moose meat out of my freezer, and I set it on the table, it doesn't melt, it thaws. It's, it's frozen solid piece of meat, and now it's not a frozen solid piece of meat. It thaws out. You have ground. The ground is frozen. The ground thaws out. Now there may be, water is going to be part of a soil, whether even in the desert there's going to be some moisture, no matter how dry it is, there's going to be some moisture somewhere in it. But that's not permafrost. That's just sort of like a matrix, if you will. It's permafrost is soil. Soil is basically broken down rocks. And you could have permafrost that is a pile of pebbles, gravel and pebbles, and it's frozen, and then when it thaws out, you have a pile of pebbles and gravel. I did a whole video, done a couple of videos on permafrost, so go please check those out. So now you could have what's called ice lenses within the frozen ground. The ice lens, which is water, does indeed melt. So the ice lens melts while the ground thaws. You must be precise here with the usage. So climate scientists have repeatedly warned about the tilt. The clay is a sediment. The icy structures store vast amounts of carbon in the form of yet to be decomposed plant material. Right, here we go again with the methane and the CO2, being the results of the decomposition process. Now, also, you got to keep in mind you have thaw stable and thaw unstable permafrost. Thaw stable would be like my pebble gravel example. Thaw unstable is when you have frozen loess, basically it's like clay. When that thaws, you get what's called liquefaction. It kind of turns into a slurry. But still, it thaws. It doesn't melt. There's no change in physical state. Thawing specifically means a change in physical state from solid to liquid. Thawing just simply means it's no longer frozen. So obviously, as we've discussed numerous times before, the permafrost issue with the methane it stores is the major concern. So researchers based in Potsdam, Germany report in the journal Nature Communications that they and colleagues that are part of what's called the Global Terrestrial Network for Permafrost monitored and measured soil temperatures in boreholes at 154 locations, more than 120 of them over a 10-year cycle. In a dozen locations, the temperatures did decrease, did lower. In 40 others, there was virtually no change. Okay, so if you do the math, that's still over 100. Let's see, 40, 50, it's still over 100 locations that saw an increase. The most dramatic warming was in the Arctic, no surprise there, where soils that were more than 90% permafrost saw the temperatures increase by 0.3 degrees C, and the Siberian North, where temperatures rose by 0.9 degrees C or more. Air temperatures over those regions had risen by an average of 0.6 degrees C in the same decade. In those Arctic regions with less than 90% permafrost, the frozen ground warmed by 0.2 degrees C. So Boris Biscaborn of the Alfred Wegener Institute, which is located at the Helmholtz Center for Polar Marine Research, he was also the lead principal investigator. He states, in these regions there is more and more snowfall, which insulates the permafrost in two ways following the igloo principle. In winters, snow protects the soil from extreme cold, which on average produces a warming effect. In spring, it reflects the sunlight and prevents the soils from being exposed to too much warmth, at least until the snow has completely melted away. So basically, yeah, for example, if you look at here in Alaska, they have the transatlantic pipeline system, TAPS. And you know, it's 800 miles long from Prudhoe Bay down to Valdez. About 400 miles of it is buried in the ground because the ground is thaw-stable permafrost, or not. And the other 400 miles is set up on these pillars because the ground underneath is thaw-unstable permafrost. And there are plumes, these big vertical ventilators, basically like radiators. That's what they are. They are radiators. And there's aluminum. What's the solution there? It's aluminum hydroxide solution. There's a cooling solution that's in there. I'm blanking on what it is exactly at the moment. But what it does is it takes the heat from the ground and dumps it into the atmosphere in wintertime. Because in wintertime, the ground is warmer than the surrounding air. So you want to keep the ground cold. So you take the heat that's in the ground, you dump it into the atmosphere. And helicopters will fly up and down taps and have IR sensors, and they look at they're looking for the infrared plume signatures from these radiators. If they don't get one, then they make a note of it and they send a crew out there to rectify it. So the snow will keep the ground warm. And we see this with burrowing animals. You burrow way down into the snow, and it's considerably warmer than on the surface. Surface could be 30 below Fahrenheit, and you go burrow down, and it might be 20 above. That's a 50-degree swing. They can probably handle that physiologically. So the scientists also report that soil temperature rises were recorded in the Alps of Europe, the mountain ranges of Scandinavia, and in the Himalayas. Other scientists have already this year identified potential disaster for many settlements in the Arctic regions. I just did a video on that, looking at what's happening to settlements, cities, towns, villages, what have you, located within regions that have permafrost underneath them. Once hard frozen topsoil in danger of thawing, and since these support industrial buildings, oil, gas pipelines, roads, the danger of severe damage to infrastructure is growing. So as the grounds thaw out, you could have roads buckling, buildings buckling and falling down. Or if there's pipelines, the pipeline break, and now we have a disaster on our hands. It could be gas, oil being released uncontrollably. So even the researchers warn that even if humans are able to maintain, 2 degrees C, no more than that warming, it's still likely that the permafrost will disappear over a large area, adding those greenhouse gases, exacerbating the situation, and positive feedback loop leading to more warming. So Guido Grossi, who heads the permafrost research in Potsdam, states, all this data tells us that the permafrost isn't simply warming on a local and regional scale, but worldwide and at virtually the same pace as climate warming, which is producing a substantial warming of the air and increased snow thickness, especially in the Arctic. These two factors produce a warming of the once permanently frozen ground. Remember, warmer air holds more moisture. Holds more moisture, you can have more precipitation, more snow. So, once again, we're seeing more and more of the dangers being presented to, regions, the permafrost area here, as this study examined. And have we set up a system that really cannot be stopped now? Well, there are some who say yes. And so far the studies are indicating that is possible. Conveyor belt, thermal inertia. Will they be enough to offset? I don't know. But it's something to think about. Thank you for your time. Hey folks, this is Jim here reminding you to subscribe to this channel, to share my videos, tell others of the work that I do here. I also ask that if you are not already a patron at Patreon, to please consider becoming a patron at Patreon. You can find the information in the description box below the video. I'm asking you to help support the work that I do. I do not take any money from corporations or from any other sources, so the information I share with you is the actual science as it comes out of the peer-reviewed journals. So there is no BS, there's no propaganda, there's no agenda. It's just I present the science and I explain to you what it means, or at least my interpretations of it, based on my own experience as a scientist. I want this channel to grow. I consider, while I discuss many different topics here, you've noticed I do focus a lot on climate issues. I consider climate change to be the most pressing issue facing humanity today. Thus, I consider it important to disseminate this information to a wider and wider, more and more people. And I need your help to do this. So, yes, please subscribe. Please tell others of the work that I do here. Please share my videos on social media platforms, with your social media groups, what have you. We need to get this information out there. So for those of you who are supporting me on Patreon, I thank you greatly for your support and continued support. It does mean a lot to me. So together we can get this information to more and more people. Thank you. Thank you for your support.